Hello again. Just to continue on with the main theme that I've been presenting in the last few YouTube lectures is to project to you in a rather cursory way, without getting into too much of analytics, a cursory way, the structure of the Tawheed, that is the monotheistic way of understanding reality. And the reality we are equating to is a combinatoric of two very essential, inseparable things. One is the world as it is, that we look at and make meaning out of it on the basis of the episteme of oneness of God, that is monotheism. And the second thing is the embodiment of this world that we look around, that we perceive, investigate, and all that in the framework of knowledge. And knowledge then carried over into space and into time as a recorder. Now, I will take up the last thing that I mentioned to you in my lecture is about how do we perceive of a domain space. A domain being really the continuity. And the important word here is continuity, because of the circular causation that exists between all the points of this domain. And of course, the number of points in this domain, you cannot enumerate them according to any perceived form of a number. In my own works, of course, I have called these to be a certain projection, or what I call the space of the Quran and the Sunnah to be supercardinal. But those are certain rather deeply analytical concepts, which I am not going to get into in these lectures. Now, let us begin by putting back that space that we had. And this is the event space. And in the event space, there are many such events. And each of these events is circularly connected with, interrelated, interactively, integratively, as well as in an evolutionary learning fashion. They are related with every other remaining point. So we have therefore circular causations of this type. And I said to you at that time that if you take a monotonic positive transformation of this, it will bring you into higher levels of understanding unity of things, of reality and of investigation, and what do you make out of the results that you derive. So this is therefore a thing that is of a higher order, functional order. So I'm going to take this meaning here and take the point here, and these are the three dimensions of theta, space, theta, and time of theta. Okay. Now when you talk of space, for instance, and if you say, well, the Quran, and if you make the assertion that the Quran is really giving you a very magnificent ecological model, and there is a good reason to understand why it is this model that the Quran is presenting to you is an ecological model, because of the fact that an ecology, like development, like sustainability, and the continuity of this phenomena is of a very connective type, very unified type. And since the Quran is presenting really one singular message, and from which we can derive many other messages, or that is to say descriptions of reality. And this is Tawheed, oneness of God, monotheism, and represented by the law of the episteme of the unity of knowledge. So now therefore when we talk of space, S here, then this S is made up of very many different choice articles which you have chosen according to preferences. And you have chosen the good things of life, rejecting the bad ones that are not good for you, neither good for society, nor for the present generation, nor for the future generation. So these are things that we discursively reject. and retain the good things of life, but only out of continuous learning processes through discourse and in befitting with the law of the oneness of God, which represents things in a way that brings about goodness, that is, benefits to the self as well as to society. Now, this SXSP, that is a space which is endowed by theta, I mean not P, but it is theta, is therefore a collection of many variables, depending upon what variables you want to really study. And since I mentioned to you about the ecological nature of the entire model of the Quran, I can identify one of these ecological model to be an agricultural model. And in the agricultural model, we have got many different diversities of agricultural goods. And to expand further beyond simply the agricultural model, but to retain the agricultural nature of the national economy, we say that the national economy is made up of many sectors of the economy that produce good things of life. And the ecological nature of this kind of understanding of the national economy is that there are balances between the various sectors in the sense that each one of the sector benefits from an exchange mechanism with other sectors of the economy. So when any one sector really connects and multiplies its diversities with every other sector, then we are really talking about that thing which I mentioned to you earlier, and I'm showing you with this kind of a evolutionary learning model, and that is the circular causation, meaning that every sector is in a balanced and exchange mechanism related with the every other sector. So if you take, for instance, any one sectoral value added or GDP, gross domestic product, and call this to be the xith sector, and which is embodied by theta, meaning that there is intrinsic complementarity, that is participation, connectedness, a continuous sense of sustainability between all the sectors of the economy. So you have got a range of variables of this, or value added, or value of production, or the GDP of different sectors of the economy, or different diversities of the agricultural good. When you bring this up here, then of course this becomes a form of a matrix model. It takes a matrix form, this model. And in this matrix form, you have got all those different x's that I mentioned to you about x1 being the value added of the sector 1, x2 being the value added of the sector 2, or you may say diversities of agricultural goods, and so on. So xn, and then again here is x2, and then you goes down to xn, and you relate it with all the other value of x2. Rather, it is better to put it into two suffixes, x11, x12, x1n, x21, x22, and this way to x2n, and then xn1, xn2 to xnn. There are therefore n number of sectors that interrelate with each other. Every one sector value added is dependent upon every other sectors of the economy, as the value added of every different sectors of the economy. Likewise, that very sector of the economy becomes a dependent variable as well as a contributing variable, independent variable. This is circular. That is, they are interrelated out of integration, and evolutionary learning through that same process of what we call is a derivation of the unity of knowledge, episteme of the unity of knowledge. This is therefore the matrix that we generate from this one. Now, the fact of this matter is that in usual forms of development model, we also come up with such kinds of representations of the national economy or the agricultural economy. But the difference that you perceive here is that there is another variable, theta, which plays a very fundamental role in here, since theta is knowledge and it is derived from the ontology and then followed by the epistemology of the episteme of unity of knowledge. So there is therefore a theta expansion of this whole thing. That is to say, if each one of these variables that you see they're interconnected with one another, they are induced, and that is possible for getting interconnected is because of the induction of every one of these variable by the learning variable theta. Thus, this whole model that you see here is now, again, as I said to you, these are non-Cartesian frames, but nonetheless we have to explain in 3 dimensions. So you have got here this, that, and this. There are 3 dimensions in this kind of thing. This dimension that you have here, it is an interconnected dimension of the axis. And what makes them interconnected is theta. Therefore, this is theta. Here is x1 and x2. They are interconnected by means of the theta as the enabling knowledge variable that induces both of the variables x1 and x2, make them interact with one another. Such is the kind of an idea of unity that the Quran is presenting to us when it says that the universe that Allah has created is a paired universe. Paired means complemented universe. And in this we study the idea of pairs, of one thing connecting with all the other things, creating thereby a continuous, sustainable universe of unity of knowledge. This is therefore a derivation from that kind of a model. And this entire model that comes from the 3 phases that I mentioned to you earlier is the ontology. This is the ontology of the system, which is the oneness of Allah. The oneness of Allah brought to life in the form of its formal understanding, and then made to relate with epistemology. Here, epistemology, and then finally from there on to phenomenology, meaning that these are experimentable things that can bring about an entire logical process of scientific thinking based on the unity of knowledge, and then from there on take it to the level of experimentation, empirical work, and not escaping from any specific form of application. These applications therefore apply in a very huge domain of investigation. Thank you very much.